Mark Gurman, Bloomberg. Sources: Apple ramps up work on a mixed reality headset set to launch as early as 2023 and renames its OS from Reality OS to XR OS, short for extended reality. The challenge for anyone who's building a computer that's meant to be worn on someone's face, I think, is how do you position the device in such a way that it supports and improves and extends what it means to be a human being and what it means to exist in the natural world, the physical world, whatever least loaded adjective you want there, and not fall into this is for escapism, this is for distraction, this is for receding or removing oneself from the natural world, the physical world. And like it or not, Apple has, I think, the strongest track record for that type of messaging. I just today saw a short film that they made for, fundamentally, it's advertising the accessibility capabilities of iOS and the iPhone by highlighting people of varying abilities, people without all four limbs that a human being normally has, people of significantly smaller stature than the average adult human being, people who are confined to wheelchairs. And in every story, obviously, there's some piece of functionality that the company wants to highlight, but the overall message is, and I'm sort of paraphrasing from Gruber here because that's where I saw the link, it's about underlining the fundamental humanity of all of these people who don't have all of the quote unquote normal abilities of a human being. Because what is normal? And more to the point, not having some ability that someone like I have should not detract from one's experience of life. And the tools that Apple builds are able to help those who don't have all of my same abilities, as an example, to have a lived experience that is as rich, more rich than my own. Again, this is a very sort of like gray area because you're trying to communicate that someone has just as much value and that the tools which are built and put into the world should serve them and meet them where they are just as well as someone who has all of the limbs that they were born with, or doesn't need some form of device in order to help them move around in the world. Again, like any sort of basic human value is the message that I think is trying to be delivered there. And this, I think, has an even higher bar because what are you fundamentally communicating? Your experience of being a human being in the world can be improved, extended, using this set of goggles that we've designed here in Cupertino, California, without communicating that life is better the more of it you live within the confines of this set of goggles and the experiences it can deliver. And I say that that's extraordinarily difficult because the I personally view the average person's relationship to the experiences they have with their smartphones as detracting from the physical world. And so if we're moving from something that you can take out of your pocket and elect to give your attention to the exclusion of whatever else may be happening around you, and then we change to, no, this is just a thing that you put over your eyes, I just think the stakes get higher. And we have a significant amount of built up experience to show that many people aren't particularly good at modulating their usage of pocket computers. So when that computer manipulates your field of vision, what happens? I don't know. I don't think anybody does. But we're all going to apparently find out as early as next year. Elon Musk, at Elon Musk. Ye's Twitter account is suspended after he tweeted a picture of a swastika merged with a Star of David. Elon Musk replied saying he violated Twitter rules. The good news, I suppose, is that he's taken decisive action. Twitter has taken decisive action, suspended Ye / Kanye West's account, not slash, formerly known as. That's what we, in the general sense, want, isn't it? That when someone violates Twitter's rules, that there's some action that's taken. The unreasonable, well, not unreasonable, the, I think, unattainable standard is that every instance where a user or users believe that another user or users have violated the rules, that action is then taken. I don't know if you've noticed, but not everyone who speeds gets a speeding ticket. The notion that all rules, which is to say laws, are consistently and uniformly enforced is, I think, somewhat naive. We want to aim for that ideal, but lamenting that we don't achieve it, I don't know that that's, I don't know, I'll back out of the metaphor. I don't ever see a time when a Twitter or a Facebook or a Snapchat or a LinkedIn or an Instagram, any other platform which enables effectively anyone on earth to espouse their idea or an idea, because let's not forget, a lot of troll behavior, which is to say toxic user behavior in large systems like this, has its origins in people disingenuously publishing toxic content to watch other people react to it as a form of entertainment. This is the trigger the libs mentality. This is the mentality of many a teenager with access to the internet and the luxury of free time, I suppose. So the fact that Ye's account was suspended, I think we need to take as a good thing. I would look forward to Elon pushing even further in the direction of executing the rules, dealing with those users who violate them, and to add some transparency to it. As an example, deactivating a user's account just sort of creates a blank page. I'm reminded of Sam Harris. So I listened last night to a part of his most recent podcast. He deactivated his account of his own volition. If you go to the URL for his account on Twitter, there's no indication of that, right? He didn't do the thing of like, this is my last tweet. He just deactivated it. And so all you see when you go there is the account is deactivated. You don't have any additional context unless, in my case, you bother to go and subject yourself to 25 minutes of Sam explaining his reasoning behind making that choice. In instances where accounts are suspended for violating the rules, would it be reasonable to describe their violations of the rules in some way on their profile page? I think that would be interesting. I think it would be useful to be able to go to Ye's account, or let's imagine a not totally preposterous scenario where Donald Trump begins to use Twitter again, and then he says something that violates Twitter's rules, or I don't know, Paul Krugman violates Twitter's rules. Like, your ideological political spectrum is irrelevant here. The point is, you would want to be able to go and understand what caused Twitter to take that action. And I think that some kind of display of this was the tweet that was in violation of this rule, and maybe we'll censor the tweet and put it behind an interstitial that says, like, you can click if you really want to read the toxic content that we believe was enough of a reason to suspend their ability to post to Twitter if you want to, but you also don't have to. You can just read the section of Twitter's guidelines that we believed this post was in violation of. I think that would be a nice step in the right direction. So consider that a feature request, Elon. Patience Hagen, Wall Street Journal. Sources: Twitter offers advertisers generous incentives, including matching $500,000 to $1 million in spending in 2022, a bid to jumpstart its faltering business. This is interesting. You'll notice spending in 2022, there are less than 30 days of 2022 left. So there's a nice forcing function here, because you can't turn around and ad spend in an hour. It takes, I don't know, at least a business day. We should talk to somebody who knows more about online advertising. But the point is, in the next month, Twitter's willing to back and effectively give a discount on ad spend on Twitter. Seems like a totally appropriate thing to do. Not an appropriate thing to offer such a program for all of 2023, but to offer it for 30 days, why not? Getting advertisers back onto that platform is no doubt important, and the noise, the heat, the smoke around how it's a less safe place for brand safety since Elon has taken over. There's a lot of noise, again, smoke around that idea. I don't, I just, all I can do is speak for myself, right? All I have is my own anecdotal experience of using the platform. I'm using it more now than I ever have before. And I don't experience a significantly more toxic environment. Again, my individual experience, not broadly indicative of anything. But the point is, I think it's possible that the narrative around Twitter becoming a less safe place for advertising as a result of Elon taking control of the company and the decisions he's made since that took place, I'm just not convinced that it's true. And I'll be interested to see whether Twitter themselves publicizes any effect from this kind of an offering. Because if you're a brand advertiser and it's the holiday season in at least the United States, if not much of the world, where people are spending money, it wouldn't surprise me, I don't know for sure, the month of November, December, January, highest consumer spending of the calendar year, probably. It might be a good idea to say we can get $1 worth of advertising on Twitter for 50 cents. Why not go do that, at least for the next 28 days? Derek Thompson, The Atlantic, a look at some implications for generative AI, answer engines replacing search engines, AI mastering cognitive tasks by surveilling how experts work, and more. This could be an interesting read. Again, very related to the episode of the Decoder podcast. I think this company was called, I don't remember, I'll get it wrong, but I'll put the same link in here again. Using what we're referring to as AI today, machine learning model based software, to learn how to do things like a human being is a field that is growing by leaps and bounds. The OpenAI group released a chatbot this week that certainly encourage you to go play with, because I haven't used it myself, but the examples I've seen floating across Twitter are some of them are very obvious and straightforward, and you can see how a machine would have created it. Others are surprising. The implications of this sort of category of software and technology development, those are quite not alarming, but if the software can learn how to do the things that represent the reason for one's employment, that's an uncomfortable place to be. You know, the general availability of DALL-E 2 just this past summer, it didn't take very long before we had to deal with the point of view that says, what value do I have as an illustrator who gets most of their income by doing contract illustration for pieces of published journalism if a piece of software can just generate an illustration? What is my value as an individual anymore? There's no easy answer there. Just everybody's gonna have to deal with it because you can't put these tools back in a box. So I don't know, go read it and go take a long look in the mirror and evaluate what you do that adds value to other human beings, which machines can't do. Daryl Etherington, TechCrunch. Parler's owner says it, quote unquote, has mutually agreed with Ye to terminate the intent of sale of Parler, unquote, after announcing the deal in October. That's probably a good move to the extent that Parler wants to continue being a going concern, giving ownership and control over that platform to someone who would appear to be struggling psychologically in the extreme. Maybe that's a reasonable way to put it. Probably a good idea to not sell your business to such a person. I don't think there's a lot much else to say, though. Richard Waters, Financial Times. Palmer Luckey's Anduril, which builds autonomous systems for the U.S. military, raised nearly $1.5 billion at a $7 billion pre-money valuation, up from $4.2 billion in June of 2021. So Palmer's company's private value has almost doubled in 18 months. That would indicate that at least the venture market believes in what Anduril is doing. From the little bits of Palmer speaking publicly that I've heard in the last 6 months, this business could be the next Lockheed Martin. Like, it could rise to be a prime, which is apparently sort of a term of art in the military contracting industry, manufacturer, provider, operator of weapon systems, defense systems, surveillance systems. You can have your sort of ethical quandaries with the creation and existence of those sorts of things. Maybe it's just because I'm a Aaron Sorkin nerd, but I'm always reminded of Jack Nicholson's monologue in A Few Good Men. We live in a world that has walls. Those walls need to be guarded by men with guns. There's a whole lot more of that speech. If you have forgotten it, it's worth taking it in. It's not great that that's the world that we live in, but it's the world that we live in. And so I, for one, am glad that the United States is producing a business built on state-of-the-art technology and ways of operating in the service of providing the blanket of freedom that allows all of us to sleep at night. Again, it's not to say that there aren't very meaningful conversations to be had around national defense, its role, its outsized investment of our tax dollars, and all the rest of it. But I don't think we have time for that today. Anil Ananthaswamy, Nature. DeepMind unveils Deep Nash, an AI agent that matches human experts in the board game Stratego by combining game theory and model-free deep reinforcement learning. Watching a computer play Stratego, it would appear, is a thing that we can do now. I'm not well read enough to really speak eloquently on game theory or model-free deep reinforcement learning. All I can say is that my suspicion is that it's named after John Forbes Nash. I think that's his full name. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Who, if I remember correctly, father of game theory, mathematician. It's a wonderful film called A Beautiful Mind about him, his life, his battle with significant psychosis. Certainly worth a watch if you're not haven't seen it. Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Paul Bettany. Well done film. Teaching software to play board games. I don't really understand what the sort of applicable learnings from these exercises are, but maybe there's something interesting there. Maybe this and the Atlantic piece about the implications of generative AI, those would probably go well together. Marco Quiroz Gutierrez, Fortune. Stripe debuts a customizable fiat to crypto payments widget for Web3 devs to directly embed into their apps. Stripe to handle KYC checks, fraud, and compliance. A customizable fiat to crypto payments widget for Web3 devs to directly embed into their apps. That sounds to me like a sort of minimum on-ramp to make moving from US dollars, Great British pounds, euros, Japanese yen to cryptocurrency a more effortless experience, which is a good thing. I mean, good for Stripe, certainly, to be moving in the direction of this business rather than positioning themselves as against it, because there's very little benefit to be found there. Still, though, maybe they've got some interesting code samples or other examples to point to, but the unanswered question continues to be, what's the day-to-day application of a cryptocurrency such that the average individual will want to hold some balance, as opposed to when I go to do wild stuff on the internet, I move some value into a cryptocurrency, I deploy it with whatever crypto coin I need or choose to, and then when I'm done, I move all of my value back out into fiat. The people who are holding balances of, I think, any meaningful size in cryptocurrency today My gut is 8 out of every 10 of those people are doing so that they can play in the sort of crypto Web3 sandbox. They're not using it to order a t-shirt or a Christmas gift or a sandwich, as I love to talk about, because there's nothing so satisfying as a great sandwich. And until there's some sort of, again, pedestrian application, Stripe making these tools easier to live with has some benefit, but I can't imagine it's going to drive meaningful adoption. Insider source: a16z's Future is shutting down. Future hasn't published a new article in months. Most of its editorial staffers have left, and its newsletter is defunct. I kind of feel like I should have been able to call this one back when this project was announced. The trend away from large scale trust in media institutions. I can't think of an organization that's better equipped to observe that trend than Andreessen Horowitz. So the notion that what they were going to do was spin up their own sort of in-house media organization, I suppose on some level it made sense, but really only on the surface, because like, what are you going to do? You're going to fund this thing to do like top shelf journalism? I mean, on one end of the spectrum, you launch Future and your intention is basically like Wired's intention circa the 90s, right? There's so much going on, there's so much changing in the industry, there's so many different ways in which software is eating the world that we need a apparatus to bring those stories to a market. That's that's never going to make sense on their balance sheet, no matter how big that organization gets. Like, it's not the business that you're in, to say nothing of the conflicts of interest and how do you cover something that is a business that's doing well in an area where you didn't invest, right? Or worse, an area where you have an investment in a competitor and they're not doing as well. You're going to cover that story, or you're not going to cover that story. It didn't make any sense. So great, like, shut the thing down, liquidate it, because it's it just seems like it's never been clearer that, particularly if you are a news making entity, if you are Mark Andreessen, if you are Ben Horowitz, if you are Chris Dixon, or any of the other like top rank partners at that firm, you make news by doing things. What more do you need in order to make sure that your version of that story gets out into the world, but a blog and a Twitter account and a handful of other media appearances, which you can get simply by asking? And I know that part of their strategy, I think they said this publicly, I can't recall, was that we want to have sort of total editorial control over what our message out to the world is, and that if we went to any other traditional media organization, they would be injecting their bias into telling a story about us or an investment that we've made, and therefore we don't want to do that. But like, it's going to happen anyway. Like, it's going to happen even if you don't give the story to Forbes or to Wired or to Vanity Fair or to the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times or whatever other institutional media organization you think still has validity. So tell your own story always seems like the better strategy. And the idea that they needed to spin up a whole brand, to say nothing of an editorial staff, in order to go do that, just seems like this is exactly the right thing to do, is shutter this particular concern. CNBC filing. U.S. Department of Justice has requested that an independent examiner be appointed to review, quote, substantial and serious allegations of fraud and dishonesty, unquote, in FTX's bankruptcy. Yeah, that would probably be a good idea. I just happened across a Twitter space last night while I was making dinner where Sam Bankman-Fried was just taking questions from whoever was invited to ask him questions. And for the 15 minutes that I listened to it, he was getting grilled. I mean, he was being asked, when did you know X? Was it on this date or that date? And what time of day? Just the idea that someone whose business has just melted down in spectacular fashion and is going through bankruptcy proceedings, the notion that that person would just show up in a public forum and respond to questions. I mean, I've never seen it done, and maybe that's because I'm old, but it strikes me as bizarre. Someone I follow on Twitter wrote, it would appear that SBF has the worst legal counsel money can buy, and my cute little joke that I laid on top of it was, or the best legal counsel crypto can buy. Where are this person's attorneys? They're allowing him to just go around in public and answer questions. It's mind-blowing to me. So this is going to be a saga. Pack a lunch. Olaf Storbeck, Financial Times. The trial of 3 Wirecard executives has begun, seeking to understand how the 24 billion euro startup imploded in June 2020, one of the largest frauds in German history. Oh, so it's not a problem that's confined to the United States startup scene for businesses that are extremely well financed, just fall apart immediately. I don't know what Wirecard does. I don't know how it imploded. Can't say that I'm especially motivated to go read up on it, except to say that there's a tremendous amount of smoke around what Elon Musk is doing with the public water cooler for the extremely online. And yet there are these other businesses which are falling apart and taking billions of dollars of other people's money with them. And it's not worth making some claim that one of them is being covered, more than another, but there certainly seems to be more sort of psychological energy. Maybe this is just because of where I spend my mental energy on Elon being an agent of chaos than there is with somebody like SBF evaporating people's life savings in some cases, I have no doubt. So these are the stories that are, I think, more meaningful in the grand scheme of things than what's going to happen to this place where everybody goes and puts their worst joke into a box and presses post. But we shall see. Financial Times. Sources: Alameda sheltered FTX from an up to $1 billion loss in April 2021 after an FTX trader's mobile coin trade went bad, wiping out Alameda's 2021 profits. That headline makes it sound as though a single trade was enough to completely eviscerate the profits of FTX's Alameda Research business. It's not entirely clear to me on what that business was, but again, from like a extremely uneducated remove, if any one transaction has the potential for taking your business's profitability to zero, it doesn't seem like a trade you should be making. But then again, what do I know? New York Times. A video and live blog of Sam Bankman-Fried being interviewed by Andrew Ross Sorkin at the New York Times' Deal Book Summit, covering FTX, Alameda, and more. Related, Bloomberg, in his NYT interview, SBF gave few straight answers while admitting to gross errors, denying claims fraud, and claiming he, quote, didn't knowingly commingle funds, end quote. I don't think there's tremendously more to say about this, at least today. This will, I'm sure, play itself out over at least the next 3 months, maybe the next 6 months, while we learn exactly how poorly operated a business which had enough veneer of success and excitement around it that Tom Brady became their spokesperson and they put their name on the sporting arena. Although, for what it's worth, I think it was Jason Calacanis on some episode of the All In podcast in the last month who said, when the business buys the naming rights to a sporting arena, sometimes that's an alarm bell. And it would certainly seem to be so in this case.